Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's briefing. We're going to wait just about a minute because we're still letting people in from the waiting room. But thank you for joining the call today. So after approximately 1 minute, once everybody's in from the waiting room, we will get started. So thank you for your patience. I think everyone has joined us that was waiting. And again, I appreciate your patience. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Gorham, and I am the Regional Emergency GBV Advisor for East and Southern Africa, working on behalf of the GBV AoR. And I'm also the co-chair of the Regional GBV Working Group for East and Southern Africa. And we are happy to be able to host this event today. This is the second briefing we have had on Tigray. About 8 weeks ago, we had a GBV specific briefing. And this briefing, we are also having child protection and gender-based violence focused briefing. And that is because in Ethiopia, we have a very unique coordination mechanism. So we have two AoRs, which are areas of responsibility, which are the humanitarian coordination mechanisms. So we have the child protection and GBV AoRs working together or in partnership to deliver protection services to those in need. So this is why we're also having a joint presentation today. And we're really happy to do that because we know that there are a lot of complementary or overlapping protection concerns for both adults and children in the Tigray region. We also think this is a really timely to have this briefing. As many of you might have seen, the UN Security Council for the first time declared concern. We hope that soon that language will be elevated to where it needs to be about the situation in Tigray. And of course, we really welcome more high-level political advocacy on these issues. But for today, specifically, we will be giving an update on the child protection and the GBV concerns in and around Tigray. We are fortunate to have some of our local partners who will be presenting today, as well as some of our UN colleagues who have been doing assessments on the ground in Tigray. And then we will also focus on the humanitarian response. And again, this is also timely for us since we are now consolidating and we're also finalizing the strategies for both Tigray, which then feed into obviously the National Humanitarian Response Plan. So just a few ground rules for today. Since we have so many participants, throughout the presentations, we will keep you on mute. And that's so that we can flow quickly through all of the information. And we do have a lot of very rich information to impart today. If you could please, if you have questions throughout the presentations, if you could write them in the chat. Myself and my colleague Philippe Carr from the GBV AoR will be monitoring the chat throughout the presentation. We will be noting down your questions, and then I will ask them at the end to the relevant speakers. And again, this is so that we can get all this information out to you in a timely manner, but then also continue with the flow. At the very end, if there's an opportunity, we will unmute if people want to ask their questions directly. That's certainly a possibility as well. So please remember, everybody will be on mute. Do put your questions in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat along with my colleague, Philippe. And then we are also getting technical support from some other colleagues at Geneva level as well. So without further ado, because I know we are a bit behind, I want to introduce our two coordinators who are based in Tigray. The Child Protection Coordinator, Eric Mhpss, and he is the coordinator for the Child Protection AoR in Ethiopia. And also his colleague and my colleague as well, Dincha van Dagen, who is the GBV AoR coordinator based in Addis, Ethiopia. The two AoRs, the joint AoR in Ethiopia, is co-chaired as well by the Ministry of Women, Children and Youth Affairs. And at subnational level, we're happy to have some of our colleagues from the Bureau of Labor and Social Affairs who also co-chair at subnational level in Tigray. So at this point, I will turn it over to Eric, who will take us forward and through the rest of the presentation. And again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jessica, and hello, everybody. Very happy to be here, a pleasure. I hope this is going to be a really good exchange. If we can go back one slide, please, Shiva. Just to take you through the agenda quickly, we will first have an overview of the situation. Can we go back one slide, please? Thank you. So we will go through the situation analysis and the overview of what's going on right now. To the agenda, please. On child protection and GBV in Tigray, and for this we'll have a local organization called Imagine One Day presenting what they're seeing, and also we'll have a colleague from UNICEF who has just completed 2 or 3 weeks of assessment in the region, sharing the results of this work. Then we will go through the humanitarian response plan and the progress of what we and the colleagues and different partners have been able to do so far in the region. So you know what are the needs and also what the response has been so far. And then we will have the pleasure to have the Bureau of Labor and Social Affairs presenting as well the plan that they have put together with the colleagues of the Child Protection and GBV area of responsibility for the region. They have identified where are the key areas where humanitarian actors can act and should act now, and also this is good hints for knowing how to support this work. And hopefully we will also discuss GBV plan for the region that has been done together with the protection of colleagues, the protection colleagues, and also with health colleagues. And then we will have a good space for a conversation, question and answers, and hopefully we'll be closing in around 1 hour, 15 minutes.
We can't hear the speaker anymore.
Hello, do you hear me?
Eric, you are well heard. Yes, coming through.
Okay, Jessica. Well, that's it from my side. Now I will hand over to Imagine One Day, again, organization working in Tigray region and currently based in Mhpss, excuse me. They will communicate from Mhpss. Over to you.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you well. Please go ahead.
Great. Can you share the slides, or I can use from my PC?
Yes, we
can.
can.
Have the slides?
The next slide, please, Shiva.
Yes, next slide, Shiva, please. And you can go ahead in Mekele.
Good. My name is Hallafom Gazai. I'm the program director for Tigray region for Imagine One International Organization. So can you go back to the first slide? To the first slide, sorry. Go back again. So today I will share you about the updates, the recent updates from Imagine One International Organization. Before that, we will share you the assessment we have done in Tigray based on our projects. And the second one, we will share you the to-date responses and the results. And at last, we will share the challenges. By the end of February 2021, we conducted an IDP assessment, a rapid assessment. So as you are looking to the slides, we assessed the IDP households and the IDP population in Magala, Adigrat, Shira, Aksum. Magala and Shira are Imagine One Day projects that we are intervening with holistic intervention. And Adigrat and Aksum are only supported by BOLSA, Bureau of Labor and Social Affairs. The only we do here is we just hired social workers and provided to BOLSA and some supplies, materials, and capacity building as well. So as you are looking to the slide, in total in Magala, Adigrat, Shira, and Aksum, there are 237,982 households who are internally displaced people from across the region. When we look at the IDP population, the total population, there are 716,673 population, IDP population here in the identified cities. This is the data by the end of February 2021. When we go to the age space, can you go next, the next slide? When you are looking to the under 5 age, there are 104,369, and greater than 5 but less than 18 or equal to 18 years old children are 136,484. Totally below 18 age children are 240,853 as you are looking to the slide. So can you go to the next slide? When we look how those IDPs, the internally displaced people, are living, for example, in Magala, 81% of them are households, and 90% of the total population are living within the host community. The schools are IDPs, and other institutions are just hosted as IDPs, but 90% of the total population are living within the host communities because the IDP sites are very crowded, and they are just schools. And when we look to the 38% of them are women from the 266 households, they are single-headed households. And 5% of the households are elders aged 65 years and above. 30% of the households are female-headed households, and 25% of them are living with no proper shelter or room because there is a lack of shelter, lack of rooms and mattress in the IDP sites. And when 37% of the total children are under 5 age, as you look there. Can you go one slide ahead? Great. So the response from the partnership between Imagine One Day and UNICEF has planned and head into practical action based on these responses. That is child protection and case management response, gender GBV protection and case management response, Mhpss and PSS support, education and emergency support, capacity building, supplies and materials provision. This is directly from the project with a holistic intervention in Magala and Shira. But this project is two things. One is supporting for the BOLSA, the Bureau of Labor and Social Affairs, and the first one is directly implementing in the IDPs. The first intervention is 7 IDPs in Magala and 5 IDPs in Shira. But the second intervention is supporting the BOLSA in other IDPs in Magala, Adigrat, Shire, and Aksum. So for those supporters, this project for those BOLSA sector, this project is helping the Bureau of Labor and Social Affairs in just hiring social workers and community social workers, capacity buildings, and providing supplies and materials. Can you go to the next slide? So as a result, can you go to the next slide? Great. As a result, just we hired child protection GBV education and emergency program coordinators, 2 CPV program officers, and 5 GBV program officers, 5 PSS officers, 12 social workers. And this staff are for the 7 IDPs in Magala and 5 IDPs in Shira. But there are also 10 social workers for Magala, Adigrat, Shira, and Aksum supporting BOLSA, and 48 community social workers are for Magala, Adigrat, Shira, and Aksum supporting for BOLSA. So we also have other monitoring and evaluations team, finance team, administration and logistics team. There are also other education and emergency facilitators, just teachers and supervisors, 12 ASR and 8 ALP. ASR is accelerated school readiness that we are supporting the children aged 5 to 6 at IDP level, and 8 ALP facilitators are teachers, qualified teachers, supporting and facilitating students from age 7 to 14, but who missed their school. Can you go to the next? And just, we directly intervene in the IDP sites and our partners through the staff and partners capacity building. We train our experts and partners with child protection and case management. We train our experts and partners with protection against sexual exploitation and abuse and code of conduct, Mhpss, PSS, and ASR training and ALP training. We conducted all those trainings for our experts and partners. And we provided child protection and case management supplies and materials, Mhpss support supplies and materials, GBV support supplies, non-food item supplies, ASR and ALP, specifically to scholastic materials. WASH and COVID-19 protection materials are already distributed to the IDPs and partner sector offices that we have. So you can go to the next slide. I'm just finishing. So the supplies to the left one are the file cabinets. Inside there are file extension files, sorry. Can you go back one slide? Those are the supplies we are provided to children, and those are the file cabinets that we manage the case management for children. You can go to the next slide. Through this capacity building and supplies provision and day-to-day supervision and mentorship, can you go to the next slide? Great. As you are looking to the table here, there are 116 unaccompanied children, separated children, 272 separated children, totally 388 unaccompanied and separated children are identified and registered. There are also 8 child-headed households even. So there are 202 single orphan children and 57 double orphan children. Total, we have 259 OVC children. At the last row, there are 133 children with disabilities. Those children are identified, registered, unified, and supported with basic services. As a result, 58 children are supported with food support with a reference, 9 with medical service, 3 with legal service, and 45 children with alternative child care activities, 4 with shelter, and 16 unaccompanied and separated children are supported by Mhpss and PSS. and 45 children are supported with family tracing. Totally, 208 unaccompanied and supplied children are supported with that. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, you can go to the next. Great. Next slide. Great. So through our education in emergency, we have one program, accelerated school readiness for 5 to 6 years old children, and accelerated learning program for 7 to 14 years old children who missed their school before 2 or some years. So we enroll through our ASR program, we enroll 662 students, and with ALP program, we enrolled 2,127 children. Totally, we are accessing with education in emergency for 2,789 students.
Mr. Halfon, we need to finish now because the next speaker should come in. If you can round up, please, in 30 seconds, and we move on.
Great. You can look to the slides.
Yes.
And the challenges. You can go to the next slide. The challenges are, one challenge is just right now the IDP sites are increasing with significant number, and there are more IDP populations that are lacking services. So this requires us more resource, financial, human, and material resources to address. And there is also a shortage of shelters and food that the IDP communities are prioritizing food and shelter other than other services even. There is also a challenge movement of IDP community members from one side to other sides, even to host communities as well. Communication and transport challenges are very crucial right now in Shira and Aksum. More human, material, and financial resources are required by IDPs, especially at Adograt, Aksum. We just simply hired experts to the Bolsa, but we are not directly intervening and supporting them. So this requires also an immediate solution to support, because those IDP communities are human beings like the others that we are supporting them. Though practical interventions are not visible at ground, other NGOs are also interfering at the same IDP sites with effort duplication, and there is also a disturbance and confusion with IDP communities. Even though there are some referral pathway mappings, but this is a real gap at ground, because there are a lot of NGOs going to the IDPs, and IDP communities are becoming busy.
Thank you, Mr. Halfom. Thank you for sharing these challenges. We need to move on. Just my colleague Dinje is gonna give a couple of more points on the situation on the GBV side to complement, and then we'll move on with Marcus Larson. Over. Dinje, over to you. Okay, Dinje is having a connection problem. Oh no, here she is. Dinje, we hear you.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I had to reconnect from my phone. Great, okay. Yes, I just wanted to give a short, and I will try and keep it short, overview of the GBV situational analysis. Of course, we have all heard and read several news reports, and in some cases have heard the direct survivor accounts of sexual violence. Our partners on the ground are also reporting a wide variety of GBV cases suffered by women and girls. And this happens in different situations while they are fleeing, while they're staying behind, while trying to access water, collecting firewoods, or accessing other basic needs and services. This includes a very high number also of child and adolescent survivors, and of course our collaboration and coordination with our child protection colleagues is really important in this space. The types of violence that have been reported include sexual violence, rape, attempted rape, intimate partner violence, psychological abuse and psychological violence, as well as survival sex, which is sex in exchange for basic needs. There we are seeing a high risk environment that is linked to the situation on the ground, including the presence of armed actors, also the types of IDP sites which carry huge GBV risks, and we will hear more about this from the next speaker, as well as extreme food shortages which lead to negative coping mechanisms. The service environment is also very limited, although of course, and we will go into more detail on that later, agencies are responding and are scaling up, but it is an extremely limited environment in terms of the institutional capacity and the facilities that are still available. And a lot of the GBV services used to be centralized before the crisis in Mhpss. But there is now a need to decentralize this to make sure that they're more accessible. Of course, services are also not accessible to all survivors, and the reports that we do receive are expected to only be the tip of the iceberg, as we've heard from survivors also directly around the stigma still attached to reporting, feelings of unsafety with accessing services, and also the distance to services that are available. That's all from my end, and I'll hand over back to Eric.
Thank you so much, Dinje. Perhaps very quickly, if we could go to the second slide at the beginning, just for those who are not very acquainted to the context. The second slide on the displacements, just for you to see the extent of displacement. This is some data from over 3 weeks ago, and we see now that the number of displaced IDPs have reached more than 1.7 million people, most of them in Tigre and others around some of the smaller towns. So it gives, and there was a lot of displacements in March, so an influx that that caused an opening of informal IDP sites, mainly schools, and now with this I will hand over to my colleague from UNICEF, Marcus Larsson, that actually was in these sites conducting some safety audits, and he will share some of the results with us now. Over to you, Marcus.
Thanks, Eric. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcus Larsson, and I work as a gender-based violence in emergency specialist at UNICEF country office in Addis Ababa. In March and April this year, I led a UNICEF team to conduct GBV safety audits in Tigray to inform our response and programming, but also for advocacy purposes, of course. The team visited 9 temporary IDP sites in Adigrat, Tigre, Aksum, and Adwa to conduct multi-sectoral audits in order to identify GBV and other protection risks across sectors. And then the checklist tool based on observations was used to identify immediate visible risks at the various camps. And this was then complemented with focus group discussions with women and adolescent girls living in the IDP camps in order to understand security and safety concerns from their perspective. We also conducted key informant interviews with NGOs, CBOs, and government agencies to map activities and services, which also helped us to triangulate the findings. Next slide, please. So on this map, you see the different places visited for the safety audits. In the northwest zone, you have Tigre. In the central zone, we have Aksum and Adwa. And in the eastern zone, there's Adigrat and Mhpss. The last one, Mhpss, was included for some of the key informant interviews, as some organizations have their regional offices there. Next slide, please. So some selected findings. Findings from the safety audits revealed insufficient or no lights at the temporary IDP camps, and most camps lacked proper fence surrounding the structure. While a few camps had benefited from wash services with new latrines, etc., most camps we visited did not have functioning latrines and irregular water distribution. And this had increased the practice of open defecation, and women and girls had to walk long distances to find water. The shelters used were mainly primary schools, and people were sleeping inside what was used to be classrooms, sometimes up to 80 persons in one single room. In some sites we visited where there was not enough space, people were sleeping outside on the ground, including women with children. Most doors lacked functioning locks, and in some instances, there were no doors at all. Broken windows in the rooms where people slept were also observed at several sites. The few health facilities and hospitals that were functioning were often located quite some distance from the campsites, but some campsites benefited from mobile health clinics. In the focus group discussions with women and girls, it became clear that many suffer from traumatic memories related to what happened to them during the movement or the flight to the IDP site. And several testimonies concerned how other women and girls could wake up swimming in the night or avoided interaction with males. We were also told about GBV incidents taking place inside the IDP camps, but that women and girls found it difficult to report and seek help. This due to a mixture of reasons, which included a culture of silence around GBV, fear of retaliation, but also general misbeliefs that any services could actually be of help. The sort of perceived potential negative consequence of reporting and seeking assistance appeared to outweigh the perceived benefits of accessing and receiving services. And in some cases, women and girls were not aware that there actually existed services related to gender-based violence. Next slide, please. So I included these photos to just illustrate some of the conditions that we observed at the campsites visited. In the top left corner, the smaller photo, this is from one of the rooms where IDP stayed in Adwa. In this room, more than 50 women, men, and children were staying together. Below this photo in the bottom left corner, you see a typical fence in the instance where there was a fence that was intended to protect the area. I'm not sure if it's shown properly here, but there are some large gaps there. And the two photos to the right show the outside and inside of the non-functioning latrine facility at one IDP site in Adigrat. Next slide, please. Based on the findings from the safety audits, it would be important to scale up services for GBV survivors to meet existing needs, especially beyond Mekelle and Shire, and in parallel, making sure that referral pathways are updated. More funding is required, not only to scale up services, but also to make sure that frontline workers who are not GBV specialists are aware of existing services and can refer any survivor that may disclose their experience in a survivor-centered manner. The GBV Pocket Guide, which is a global initiative on how to refer a survivor, has been contextualized and translated to Ethiopian language, including Tigrinya. And UNICEF, UNFPA, and UN Women will organize trainings for the rollout. But it's important that this continues to be done systematically and especially across Tigray. It's also important that organizations have adequate financial and technical support to mainstream GBV into all their projects, WASH, nutrition, education, etc., to make sure that GBV not becomes an isolated protection and health issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcus, for sharing these findings. And I know this has not even been published yet, so it's very, very interesting that you could share this with us. Thank you. So we've discussed a little bit about the situation, and now we will discuss a little bit about the plans that the sectors have been trying to put together to respond to this to the needs that were described before. And maybe the first point to notice is that this is changing very quickly. And even the HRP that hasn't been yet published, the figures that we use for Tigray are already obsolete. So the figures you're seeing today are actually updated figures with people in need, children in need of protection, and people in need of gender-based violence, with updated numbers, close to 1 million each, actually, and new targets as well. Of course, the targets are not trying to address all the needs. We need to know that there are still a lot of challenges of access in the region. We don't have the map here, but we will share with you the access restrictions all around the region. So the targets still have increased from the previous estimates, and we are above 318,000 children and their families that will be targeted for child protection activities, and over 538,000 for GBV. And the financial ask now and the estimated budget is over $32.5 million. Now, we have conducted several exercises of prioritization of the actions, and we've selected 40 waredas where the most where we have more people now with the current displacement, and we're trying to have at least those places covered by partners. Can we move to the next slide, please? Now, from this request, from the information that has been reported to the CP and GBV AoR, we have $6.3 million confirmed and 1.75 in the pipeline. So we're thinking the funding gap at this stage is over $26.2 million. Now, and this will be my next section, I will discuss, because there are massive gaps and massive needs, but also a lot has been done. And one of the things that is visible, and if we could see these numbers maybe a couple of months ago, is that we have now 27 partners working in the region. And this is really, in itself, it's really an achievement, because this was an area that was not in the past prioritized for child protection and GBV actions. So scaling up the response has been something, has been a good achievement. Shiva, I wonder if I can share my slides, because this is not the last updated version. Is it possible that I share my presentation?
Sure.
Excuse me 1 second. Okay. Do you see well?
Yes, all good.
Okay. So having people and organizations working and establishing themselves, opening offices, having staff put in place has taken a long time. I think this explains the gaps that are still there, but slowly the capacity has been growing. Now, it's good to mention that most of the actions and the activities right now are concentrating around the biggest populated towns. This is especially Mekele. Slowly Shire, where we saw that more IDPs are staying right now, is also growing in capacity. And in some other measures, intermediary towns in Aksum and Adigrat. This means that we have a lot of other areas that have not been covered right now, where the action is very, very small. You saw that we are reaching 18 waredas, and this is little towns. So we still have a lot of places that we're not being able to address right now. And even these sites where we are and we're building capacities, they're not yet fully covered. So even in Mhpss or in Shire, where you have more partners working, even in these places, there are still gaps, and some activities are taking place, but a lot are still not taking place. Nonetheless, the Bureau of Labor and Social Affairs have already deployed 48 social workers to these different cities that are there, Mhpss, Shire, Aksum, and Adigrat mainly, and partners are in the process of updating referral pathways. Also, training is taking place. There is a lot of new social workforce coming into the area. So there is training happening on case management, referral pathways, psychological first aids, etc. Dignity kits has been one of the things that have been able to be done quite quickly, and I think for the GBV response as well, that will be mentioned later. Now, the establishment of safe spaces in these IDP sites, they've also taken place especially in Mhpss and Shire, but still, as Marcus mentioned, still there is a lot that are not covered. So, but slowly the safe spaces for children and for women are being established. Some psychosocial support is being given in what we call level 1 and 2. So it's the basic, and but more focused and more specialized needs to take place as well. And as our colleague for Imagine One Day mentioned, there is already identification of children at risk in some of these sites. But as we will see, what we do with these children, how do we refer them to other services? It remains a big challenge, because the services to be referred to, many are still not in place. And finally, also to mention that the child protection and the GBV AoR have been activated in Shire and Mhpss, and some specific task forces on family tracing, on case management, and Mhpss are being structured right now. So the coordination mechanism is really vital. It's building up. It's not where it should be yet, but it's building up, and we're putting resources into that. Next slide, please. Oh, excuse me, it's me. So one of the challenges that I mentioned, of course, the access, the size, and the rapidness of the influx. In March, really tens of thousands of people were arriving and into this location, and you could see in Shire the IDP population very quickly outran the local population, and it became 3 times more significant than the host population. So huge efforts have been put into place as well by the host communities, and they have responded, giving food and doing a lot of the activities for the IDPs coming. Also good to know that there are all other risks that are still there. Schools have been closed since March in Tigray, and this of course is a problem for all the children of the region, but this adds to the risks that children are facing. And one of the, as I mentioned, the capacities and the presence of child protection actors, including the Bureau of Social Affairs, was very small. So building up was a challenge. Now, urgent areas to scale up that have been identified by the sector is the family tracing and reunification and alternative care. We have a lot of children that are being identified in the sites, and that they need to find their families, and in the meantime they need to be taken care of. So this is an urgent action to be stepped up. Mhpss, there is some Mhpss taking place. Still, a lot more can be done, and we had a global expert coming to support the country in having an Mhpss strategy to put into place, and hopefully we'll be working on this in the coming months to step up the way we respond to this need. Then I will go a bit faster. We need to strengthen the referral pathways. We need to build the capacities of all the actors to do this well, and also we need to have much more sites covered. I said, many of the most populated towns, this is where the actions are taking place, but some reach with mobile units are arriving to rural areas, but a lot are uncovered. And this is not to mention Western Tigray, the west of Tigray, that remains an area where access is really, really difficult. And this is actually where people are displacing from. So for sure, protection action there is not taking place as it should. And it is a concern. So in what we need to scale up in the bits medium and longer term is this access to these areas where the biggest protection concerns are taking place. Now we also need to scale up and make case management much stronger. There is a national framework that was adopted by the ministry in 2019. We need to make it functional for the region. We need to scale up Mhpss capacities with also more specialized services with, of course, health colleagues and other colleagues. And we need to make sure that child protection is well mainstreamed within the management of camps, in education. When education is going to resume, hopefully IDP children will be also be able to access school and health and all the basic goods that that will need to be provided to the population. So I will leave it there, and maybe you can share your screen again. Shiva, over to you, Dinje, please.
Thank you. So on the GBV response, and I'll try and focus on the progress to date, which then gives you an indication as well of generally our key activities. So our high-level activities for GBV, for the GBV AoR, they're focused on case management, the provision of psychosocial support, community outreach and awareness raising, dignity kit distributions, and capacity building. And you can see below the exact reach so far until mid-April, based on our most revised targets. So a total target of over 500,000. And this is the reach that we have for 2021. Now, the GBV response is focused on, as I said, the core activities around service delivery for case management and psychosocial support. As I mentioned before in the situational analysis, a lot of this was very centralized in Mhpss, and there is now one-stop centers established in 5 other towns, so in each of the zones, in recognition that the comprehensive service provision should be decentralized and brought closer to the survivors for better access. Now these one-stop centers are in their startup phase. They will have a lot of further capacity needs going forward, but they are supported at the moment by UNFPA in terms of training, capacity building, as well as SRH supplies and general office and things like this. As well as that, the key GBV case managers received GBV case management training by CST and Troycare recently. Other core activities include the capacity building of our service providers, not only focused on the one-stop center, but also at Woreda level, which is the lower governance level in Ethiopia. And making sure that at those levels, health facilities are also well equipped in terms of GBV basics and the GBV guiding principles, clinical management of rape, and psychological first aid, as well as PSS. Community outreach and awareness is also a key activity, and this will focus and this is already focusing both on sort of mass awareness raising, as well as more structured community conversations around coffee ceremonies, for example. The focus on prevention and mitigation that is linked as well to the distribution of dignity kits, which we are promoting to have strong safety elements included in them. And for example, dignity kits provided recently by IRC and UNICEF.
Oh, great.
All had
about the training that Fiona did.
I see.
Oh, wow.
There's some people unmuted. And so the dignity kits that have recently been distributed around Tigray all included really strong safety elements around flashlights, for example, which ties in as a response also to some of the findings shared by Marcus, our previous speaker. On a lot of the community outreach and the coffee session, of course, this is also linked to really promoting the benefits of seeking services and seeking care, and making sure that ultimately the service provision side that NGOs are scaling up is also actually accessible to survivors. Around the advocacy and monitoring, there is collaboration with the protection cluster with other key protection actors, including human rights actors, including different political offices in New York as well as Geneva, to make sure that we're collecting and monitoring data and that we can feed that back up to the relevant and appropriate levels for higher level advocacy. Eric already touched upon the coordination piece, of course, that we as the AoRs are facilitating. Next slide, please. Just briefly on some of the challenges, and I'm sure there's also lots of questions around this, and it's great to have some of our partners on the call with us today who can talk on this much more from the field. But we continue hearing from partners the challenges around safety and security, which is impacting access, and even still today, partner staff are stuck for almost 2 weeks, sometimes in towns, unable to head back, to move, and to access internet and very interrupted mobile services. So this is obviously still very much a reality on the ground and hindering for the whole humanitarian response, and including our GBV service providers as well. Their ability to scale up and establish more sustainable presence in areas. The basic services also for operating around banking services, which is also restricting the easy hiring, payment of staff, procuring goods, like a lot of the logistics around it. I think we often underappreciate how much that is affecting the daily work that people are able to do. We talked already about the financial response gaps that we have identified. But at the same time, wanting to recognize already a lot of the donors that have contributed to the response so far, including through the different pooled funds, through the Ethiopian Humanitarian Fund, through SURF, as well as dedicated funding from bilateral donors. I won't try and name them all because I'm sure to miss some and I'll get in trouble. Around the technical aspects, a scale up needed around case management and Mhpss. Case management in particular the capacity was very low before the crisis. While there's case management capacity in other areas of Ethiopia from organizations, the newer influx of agencies moving into this space, as well as even our usual existing strong partners in this space, their capacity to scale up is difficult without actual more technical boots on the ground. And then in terms of the locations as well, which I didn't mention on the slide, but definitely our response has been quite focused. I mean, this is linked to some of the safety and security, very focused on key major towns, Mekelle, Tigre, and some of the other towns dotted. In coordination and info management, my last point, in that we have definitely recognized the need to scale up the coordination capacity and information management, which will allow for better analysis, better support to partners in terms of the very practical and operational focused needs and location gap analysis. Over back to Eric.
Thank you, Dinje. And now I think this is a good transition to go to the deputy head of the Bureau of Labor and Social Affairs from Mekele, Mr. Getachew Delesane, and he will walk us through the plan that the AoR partners, with the support, of course, of the agencies have put together, and all these plans will be made available to you as well, so you know as well how to support and how to coordinate in these actions. So over to you, Mekele. Behailu, you are in mute. If you can unmute and come in. Now we hear you well. Go ahead, Behailu.
Okay, thank you. So this is Getachew from Mekele, from Bolsa. We have a very brief presentation. Actually, most of the issues are already presented by the presenters. I'll just highlight key areas. So this plan was developed in collaboration with major actors in the region, more specifically with the support from UNICEF and UNFPA, and Bolsa was also facilitating this. So basically we have identified these 7 key areas. The first was coordination. So we have, initially especially, we have identified over 50 partners who said to work on CP and the GBV. So we have tried to do the coordination. And case management, we have also made case management as our priority area. So now we are just, we have started on that, especially with the support of UNICEF project, IPs, UNICEF IPs. We have also GBV as the third focus area. Currently, we are also working on alternative care arrangements, especially for those children whom we are challenged to do the reunification and integration. So we are also planning to do alternative care arrangements other than reunification. Mhpss is also one of our priority area. As it can be easily noted, we have an overwhelming kind of crisis. So mental health and psychosocial support is really critical, and we have planned to address it. We are also working to mobilize the community, to engage the community in every aspect of child protection and gender-based violence. We have also planned to facilitate for complaint and response mechanisms, especially for sexual exploitation and abuse. So these are the 7 major focus areas. The detail is in the Excel sheet in the response plan. So basically, these are the major areas. Do I have the next slide? Can I have the next slide? Is this the only slide? All right, thank you. Okay, so far, I mean, it's just the 5th month since the onset of the crisis. So we have faced lots of challenges. Funding is the first critical challenge. As it was noted very well in the previous presentations, we have the government structure shattered from the region all the way to the district level. So we have a huge gap in terms of capacity, and the emergency is just overwhelming and beyond the capacity of the government structure. And the current support, be it from the UN, the international NGOs, the local NGOs, and the community, is very limited. And so we're just struggling with the problem. And we have also limited capacity as I said, in terms of the government structure and even the other sectors. Limited capacity of NGOs, especially for those specialized, critical services, for handling case management, for addressing GBV, and for conducting FETR. So, because of the fact that there was no strong civil society in the region even before the onset of the crisis. Now everybody is just building their respective capacity. So, but the crisis is so rapid and overwhelming. So we're just challenged. So yeah, this is how it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Getachew. And yes, it's overwhelming, but also to recognize the incredible efforts all of you have been doing in the field, and also the incredible mobilization and response of communities and the solidarity. It was really touching to see that. So so it's good to note that as well. With this, we'll go to the last part of this presentation, and then we'll go to the Q&A. And Dinje, over to you.
Yes, thank you. So this is the last slide, and we will provide further detail in at a later stage. But we wanted to did present to you the health cluster and protection cluster joint response plan to address GBV. This is a more higher level response plan that is very much based on the existing regional response activities of each of our own separate clusters and AoRs, as well as the regional response plan that Getachew just also just presented and summarized, as well as, of course, separately from the health side in the same way. And what we really wanted to showcase is how the different roles and responsibilities between the health cluster, the protection cluster, and the CP and GBV AoRs, as well as other clusters for multi-sectoral response, are interrelated, and who's responsible for what, and especially to showcase some of the key activities that we really work on jointly, and we have to work on jointly more strongly. So there are specific indicators and targets which will measure our progress against this plan. These are all based on the humanitarian response plan indicators, and the targets are based on the updated target that we presented earlier in the PowerPoint. So what you see in front of you is that there's 3 main sections to the joint response plan. Outcome area 1 will focuses on the response services, and this is what you see in the middle. And when we talk about medical care and the health response, this is mainly a health cluster, a responsibility around clinical management of rape, supply provision, training, and at the same time around the medical care, and that goes much beyond, is the one-stop centers that are based in hospitals, which provides a comprehensive set of services, both medical care, psychosocial, case management, and sometimes referral to and often referral to protection services too, which is very obviously, of course, a joint responsibility across the health cluster, across protection, and across the CPGBV AoRs. You'll see case management here in the middle as well, which is very much a specialized GBV AoR service provision, as well as the CP AoR service provision alone. But then when we think about mental health and psychosocial support, that role and responsibility is across the different clusters, and through different coordination platforms, such as an Mhpss technical working group. We're collaborating on this thematic area. So that is to summarize very broadly the response services in the middle. Then there's another outcome area that this plan covers, which is around prevention and risk reduction, which you can see at the bottom, which includes the provision of dignity kits And as I said before, the safety elements that come with that, which is very much, again, a GBV AoR and CP AoR specific activity. While community outreach is something more done across the protection cluster and the CP and GBV AoRs, as well as elements from health as well through health extension workers. And training and capacity building is also, again, something that we're really doing across the clusters. Clinical management of rape trainings can be provided both through health cluster capacity, but also the GBV AoR partners have capacity to provide this as well. Then my last outcome area is around coordination and advocacy. I also note the time, which is really making sure that across the different clusters we are collaborating, we are in regular contact, there are different working groups, how we can do this. And an example of that is the Mhpss technical working group that I mentioned as well, to facilitate that collaboration. The working together on strategies and response documents, of which this is one example, as well as the political engagement with across the protection cluster, human rights actors, also at different levels, both national and global. So links to this, the details of this plan will be provided after the briefing for you to dive into if you would like from a technical point of view. Over.
Thank you, Dinje, and thank you to all the speakers. We're done with the presentation. It was a bit long, but hopefully useful for you. And I can see there is a lot going on in the chat. So maybe Jessica, over to you if you want to let us know what's going on in the chat and start answering. And
Yes.
we have colleagues who can also step in. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Eric, and thanks for everyone's really great participation with questions in the chat. We do appreciate that, and I've been furiously marking down those questions, and I will note, though, that we are going to close questions now, so any additional questions that you put in the chat, we probably won't get timed to address because we do have a lot. And just to make sure everybody remembers, we will be uploading the presentation and the recording, and at a little later date also a summary note, which is a little bit more comprehensive, onto our respective websites. And I think that Philippe has been giving the link to that website throughout the presentation. So that was asked many times, and I just want to again reinforce, all of this will be available to you on our respective websites. So quickly moving through the questions, I'm going to start with questions that were posed to Imagine One, our first speaker. There were a couple questions about the breakdown of the IDPs, and I also put in the chat that I think those were on some of the slides that you provided. So please note that those, someone was looking for a gender or a sex breakdown of IDPs. That was actually included on one of the slides, so you will get that. Some of the other questions, and this is in relation to Imagine One, and if others have answers to this, please feel free to chime in.
If I may, this is Nev Jeffries. I did ask the question. I saw the numbers. I wanted an interpretation of the numbers because it appeared that there was a significant majority of males in the IDP population, and I just wanted some commentary on that. It wasn't the numbers, it was the analysis of the numbers. Thank you. Over.
Good. Okay. And I think, thanks, Nev, for bringing that up, because that was actually what my next point was. So I did have some questions on that analysis, as Nev just pointed out. So one is the analysis on the breakdown of those numbers. And we had specific questions around unaccompanied children data. What is the percentage of unaccompanied children when we talk about this IDP population? And also if those unaccompanied and separated children also include cases managed by other organizations. So I'm going to group those together. One is a more specific breakdown on the gender of our IDP distribution. And the second questions are specifically related to unaccompanied and separated children. what is the percentage of the overall population, and is that inclusive of all other organizations, or is it just Imagine One? Over. Bahailu, if you could have our colleague from Imagine One, or Bahailu, if you also want to chime in here, you'll have to go off mute. Go ahead.
Jessica, sorry, it was disconnected. We didn't hear you the whole question. Can you repeat us once?
Yep, I can. So it's specifically about the IDP data that was presented in the Imagine One presentation. There were specific questions about unaccompanied and separated children, whether the data presented is the entire caseload, or is that just the numbers for Imagine One? And then also, what is the percentage of the total IDP population in terms of unaccompanied children? And then our colleague wanted to also understand a more nuanced understanding of the gender breakdown, both male and female, because there was a high also percentage of males in your IDP figures. Over.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Just, you know, the government, the Getachew, the deputy of both sides, almost left because he has some urgent task. So I may not answer some of the questions because some questions that you raised about the data of the IDP has to be responded by the government, especially Bolsa, because they are mandated to register the whole IDP populations in the region. But for your information, data is a very challenging thing in the case of Tigray, and we cannot still get age and gender, sex breakdown data for the IDP population in Tigray. This is very challenging because only now this assessment done by Imagine One Day just only focusing on the Shire and Mhpss, but in the whole population, they have some estimates. They have the 1.7 million IDPs, but you cannot find the age and sex breakdown data from these estimated IDP populations. And also there is the arguments between RAM and Bolsa data. RAM saying it's around 1 million and Bolsa saying 1.7 million, but coming to the gender, the sex and age issue, it's not unclear from the Bolsa, and we cannot find reliable data on that. Coming to the unaccompanied and separate children, we can tell you, I mean, some figures just specifically for Tigray and Shire, but for the other areas of this crisis affected, we cannot give you a very clear data for the time being. Just we have around 2,129 IDP unaccompanied separate children, just in 3 waradas in the region, I mean 3 towns in the region, Shire, Mhpss, and Abiy towns. But the others still, you know, the identification is of unaccompanied separate children is continuing, but we have no very clear data to tell about the percentages of unaccompanied and separate children at this time, because identifications is going on, and we have limited partners, particularly in some areas like Adwa, Aksum, Adigrat, Shiraro, Mhpss. So we are now trying to get some partners, but still the identification is not completed. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bahailu. And
Can I add to
Eric,
that? Can I
please
add
do.
from
Yes.
Imagine One Day?
Imagine One Day. Yes.
Yes. This is Halafon. Regarding the unaccompanied children data, it's not the whole. It's not for the whole Tigray region. It is for Imagine One Day and UNICEF partnership project, which is in Shire and Makala. Regarding the gender of the population at IDPs, we at any time we use the gender analysis. We bring the first number for boys, for girls, and for females. For example, if you go to the internally displaced children, which was assessed by Imagine One Day by the end of February, more than 50% of them are females, girls. And when we go to the total population, almost 45% of the IDP population are females. So still there is a huge number of females at IDP sites. Thank you.
Thank you. And while I have you on the line, just a clarification question. Can you clarify the difference between single orphan versus double orphan?
Great.
You mentioned it.
Yeah. Single orphan means a child who lost one of his parents or one of her parents, either mother or father. But double orphan means just a child who lost both parents, mother and father.
Well noted. Thank you. And I have another question for our colleagues in Tigray. I am going to cluster these together. We had questions about the level of engagement of community-based and locally based organizations. So how are you engaging them in the response? And also another question about their ability to access. Are there accessibility issues around even local and national organizations in the Tigray region? So I've coupled two questions together. Bahailu?
Actually, one of the effects of this crisis is disrupting, the community structures, the community-based structures. They are now, Tigray region, the community-based structures, called Community Care Coalition is one of the best community structures that respond many problems that we're facing children, but at this time, it's very disrupted because of the crisis. But still, there are some community structures we are now using, particularly, in IDP sites, the IDP population, they select their committee. So in every IDP committee, in every IDP site, there are IDP committee. So now they are serving as a source of identifications of vulnerable children, unaccompanied children, separate children. They are registering all the IDP populations communities. So we are using as a source of identification. And also now we have a plan to use just to family-based alternative care arrangement like foster care and kinship care. They are going to also serving for these services. Last week, even we provided training on the referral pathways because they are one of the source of identifications and even service provision, because they are engaging in this traditional kind of psychosocial support. There are religious leaders who are providing some sort of support for different groups. So that is one of the area that we are using with this traditional committee. I mean, the committee-based structures. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bahailu. And Dinche, did you want to give just a little bit of feedback from the GBV side, please?
Yeah, actually, I was just going to raise that we do also have some partners with us in the room today. So I did want to also offer the opportunity, and maybe if they want to step in at any point and also answer some of these questions from their perspective directly, to please feel free to raise your hand. But I won't call on any of you directly. But I have seen colleagues from IMC and ASDEPO, Child Fund, CST, and the big UN agencies, UNHCR, UN Women, and UNFPA also here. So if you do hear a question that you feel you can answer very well and you want to share, please do so. From the GBV side, a lot of the UN partners are working with local organizations, yeah, I could mention the Women Association of Tigray, which is a major player and was already, for example, a partner before the crisis, and which has an extensive network, but is currently very centralized in Mekelle. And then a lot of partners also working with community leaders, maybe not always organized in community-based organizations, but are working through community leaders and faith leaders as well. And I know that one of our local partners, OSSHD, is very strong in this space too.
Great, thanks, Dinche. I'm going to go to another. Yes, go ahead.
Just to, I missed one of your questions regarding access. Access is very challenging.
Thanks.
Yeah, access is very challenging currently. Even there are active fights in different places. For instance, currently we cannot access Adwa Aksum from Mekelle, even Ariadi. Before today's it's closed. We cannot, provide technical support and monitoring. And for instance, we have social workers trained by Imagine One Day and handed over to Bolsa to be working in Aksum at Tigray. And we cannot, provide technical support for this staff in these areas because of access issue. We say because of security problem. Access is denied. Even we cannot go to Shire because it's one of the huge caseload, even the highest IDP population in the region. We cannot travel from Mekelle to Shire through Aksum, Tigray, or Ariadi because of the security problem. Now we are trying to access Shire from through Gondar. And this is a very challenging thing. It's taking 3 days to reach Shire from through Gondar, So you can imagine how is this access issue is very challenging for the field office to provide the support for this IDP population. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for that really direct account of what's happening on the ground. And I think it's really important that all of us understand the constraints, because sometimes we need to set high expectations for sure, but we also need to temper that with the reality about security on the ground. So thank you from our colleagues in Tigray. I'm going to group a couple of questions about Mhpss, and I saw that WHO also just wrote in the chat about that. So I will direct this one to both Eric and Dinche, because I know this was a joint collaborative by the both AoRs. First, is there an Mhpss specialist on the ground currently in Tigray? And then can you give us more information about how Mhpss is being conducted for child survivors and what challenges you might be experiencing? And then also, and I think this might be for both as well, what are you doing to strengthen coordination for child and adolescent survivors? for instance, ensuring that services are available, that they meet quality, and that they're accessible. So sort of 3 questions. 1, do we have a resource person on the ground, a specialist? 2, how are you implementing MHPSS with child survivors? Have you encountered any challenges? And 3, coordination between CP and GBV around child and adolescent survivors. I'll turn this over to Eric and Dinche. Over.
Oh.
Go ahead. Dinche, why don't you start?
Okay, sure. I didn't keep note of the questions, but we were very lucky, and Eric can speak more on this, to have an MHPSS rapid deployment, rapid response team deployment coming to Tigray for 6 weeks, and he was hosted by the CP AoR and by UNICEF. He has, I'll leave that to Eric to expand more on, but that was really great impetus for us to collaborate across the different sectors and to really put our collective heads together to agree on priority areas and how we can strengthen coordination and the actual response on the ground. In terms of MHPSS specialists on the ground right now in Tigray, from the GBV AoR side, I don't think there's international expertise there on the ground at the moment. There is national expertise and also experts and psychologists from the Ministry of Health deployed in Mhpss at the moment. And we did invite our health cluster colleagues also along to this meeting, but I have not seen them online. So there's definitely expertise currently there in and around Mhpss, but also not yet to the extent as we would like to see in the other areas. And this is then talking more around coordination and technical input. There's MH expertise as well through some of the health partners in the major towns, including through MSF. I also know that UNFPA is arranging an international deployment for strengthened capacity in Mhpss as well, and I know also other actors are looking at the same.
Eric, anything?
Yes, just to complement a couple of things. One, there is an MHPSS technical working group that is co-led, if I'm not wrong, with the Regional Bureau of Health and IOM will have an expert, I think, coming soon. I think MSF has also some psychiatrists in some of the areas, but all in all, there is a little bit, but it's really insufficient and very, very limited again. And we have some organizations working on MHPSS, but it's very limited. Much more needs to be done and scaled up. Just also to mention that there are other local organizations from the civil society, for example, from religious groups and so on, that are providing support and their presence and them being with communities is really important, and they're doing a lot of work that maybe doesn't appear necessarily in our 4 and 5 Ws, but for sure one of the recommendations of Kuhn's evidence that came from the Global Child Protection AoR was to work with the organization to because they really have the reach and the ear of the people.
Great, Eric. Great. That actually dovetails nicely to the question we had about engagement with religious leaders, noting that the really strong support system that they often provide. Anything else to add about specific efforts to engage religious leaders in terms of both the response to survivors and even in child protection issues? Eric or Dinche?
Maybe we can hand this also to Bahailu. I know that specifically religious leaders are mentioned as a component in the response plan at Tigray level. I don't want to put you on the spot either, but...
Yeah, it's okay, no problem. Actually, we have one very good initiative that I can mention here is one NGO, local NGO called OSAD. They are, mobilizing religious groups and to provide psychosocial support for the IDP communities. That we can mention, and that is really, appreciated. And many more than in a weekly basis, more than 3,000 IDP communities are participating in this religious support, and people come to these religious leaders and they're venting out their stresses, they listen, they provide advice, and that we can mention. Maybe there is a challenge that in the CPGB AoR meeting, the NGO mentioned it has limited funding, and also requesting, the support for scaling up to other areas out of Makale. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, maybe to add, imagine one day Nofom is with me, but before him, I also need to add, the Ethiopian government is a EPHI, Ethiopian Public Health Institutions, together with the Minister of Health and Bureau of Health. They deployed around 29 Mhpss experts from different universities, and they are providing Mhpss services, including mental health services, to rape survivors across the regions. But there is still a limited number. I think UNICEF is working to bring Mhpss experts to the region. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Specific to Imagine One Day UNICEF Partnership Project, the project hired 5 PSS experts, Mhpss experts. 3 of them are in Magala and 2 of them are in Shira. Those experts are the actors that they can work with religious leaders, elders, and clan leaders as well. So they work with those experts and other experts as well with referral pathway partnership, memorandum of understanding with hospitals and religious institutions and some other organizations working together for PSS awareness. They are working individually for individual children and to create an awareness with IDP group-wise sites. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And just, I wanted to make sure that we hit those other 2 questions. Are there special considerations for child and adolescent survivors?
Can I answer this? Yeah, in the project, in our project, there is a special consideration for adult. Even we train for adolescents through our GBV program and with social emotional learning program and in other parental skill trainings even. So we consider with a special attention to them.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time. I saw that Dinche answered in the chat Martine from SDC's question around whether there's a possibility for lighter services to be sort of rolled out, or mobile services in communities that we haven't yet have full services set up. So I'm going to say that that one has been answered because Dinche did do it. We have a couple of questions around assessments. And maybe first, though, I want to get to put the services. There was a question about, during our last briefing, I'm adding to the question, we did say that there was a gap in case management services and capacity of social workers. So can you talk a little bit about that, Dinche, from the GBV side? How does it look at this moment in time in terms of that as a priority? Case management for GBV survivors. It was recognized as a gap during our first briefing. What has been some of the efforts made since then?
Yeah, so the case management does continue to be a gap. We do have our partners who were on the ground, and some were already on the ground a few months ago, most notably IRC in, for example, Tigray, who were providing case management services at the time, but to a much smaller catchment area. And who are expanding their reach in terms of IDP sites that they can reach around Tigray, though it's hard for them to scale up with the really sudden influx that they had. Actually, when Eric and I were on the ground there a few weeks ago, they had seen an increase from 6 IDP sites to 14 in the span of 2 weeks. So they really had to also work a lot on enabling access to the case management space that they had, and making sure that even if they couldn't set up specifically in other sites, that they could at least receive referrals also through the health partners, and also through other partners that were scaling up around there. So we've seen a scale up and startup of services in the major hubs, and yeah, but I think the biggest gap is around expanding from the major urban towns, and making sure that some of the basic capacities also exist at Borada level. I know that a lot of agencies have a much broader spread on the ground, but not with specialized case management services. They might have started interaction with communities either in other sectors or just with Dignity Kids. And I think these are the gaps that could provide a really good entry point and opportunity to also scale this up, and especially agencies that may not have worked strongly on case management before in Tigray, but who I know have case management expertise from other countries. I would really invite them to also step up in this space, and to really go beyond the awareness raising, the Dignity Kids, and to also pool your experience. Of course, also partner with us at the coordination team. We can link you up with all the existing guidance that exists. And there's conversations ongoing to also have a more a specific task force on case management, potentially on supervision as well. And hopefully that can also bridge the gap and pull more partners into this space.
Thanks, Dinche. So what I'm hearing from you just now is that from our partners at global level, who are always asking what they can do to help strengthen the response at country level, one of those areas is very much if you have experts in case management, to utilize those experts to help train their staff at country level, so that we make sure that we also are maintaining and promoting universal and global standards of care. And I think TroCare has just been on a mission doing just that. We have been supporting from the GBV AoR side as well, but as Dinche mentioned, the needs are pretty overwhelming because of the constant changing of the context and also locations. So thanks, Dinche, that's well noted. I know that we're running out of time, so I will start to, we're making our way through. I have a couple questions. This is a refugee question, and we might have either Dinche or Eric might be able to answer this, but maybe also if we have someone from UNHCR. Who is doing the CP and GBV assessments services for the refugees in Tigray? We'll only mention this shortly since that's not our mandate, but it was a question asked. Who is doing or looking out for or assessing the CP and GBV needs and services for refugees in Tigray?
Sorry, I was also trying to answer a question in the chat. Anything on refugees, I don't want to say it's too simplistically, but the AoR, it covers the IDP population and populations affected by basically everyone affected by crises except refugees. I think for any questions on the refugee response, UNHCR is really your best entry point, and they coordinate across all of the sectors, including GBV, for the refugee response.
And Dinche, just to clarify though, if it doesn't matter what your status is, if you want to access services at Tigray level, whether you are a refugee, an IDP, or community member, you can access services. Is that correct?
As I've understood, that the one-stop center services in particular are accessible to everyone and are also free of charge. The IDP sites I visited in Shire were also accessible in terms of, like, for example, health services, also accessible to the host community, even though they were being based in the IDP site. Although I did not hear specifically in the Shire area around the accessibility for refugees.
Okay.
So I can't quite answer that, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
Can I just come in 1 second, just to so for
yes.
people to know, there were 4 refugee camps in the area, and 2 were sort of dismantled or destroyed with recent events. There are still 2 that are operational. I think Jean as well included some of the partners that are working there. And also maybe good to note that some of the people that had to flee also went to other countries, specifically, I think to South Sudan. So it's an additional challenge, of course, for family tracing and putting families back together, among others. So it's an important element to mention. Yeah. Over.
Great, thank you. And I have 2 sets of questions left. So the end is in sight. As I said, we're not taking any additional questions, but both the slides and the recording will be available on each of our websites. These questions, Marcus, are you still with us? We have a couple questions around coordination with other clusters, particularly around protection risks. Marcus?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. So one question was around, since you've identified a lot of prevention or protection risks in IDP sites, what is CCM doing to help also to help mitigate this? And then also, what are we doing as a whole to work with other AoRs to mitigate these risks?
Yeah, thank you. Well, from our interviews with the CCM cluster, with the shelter and NFI cluster, they are, to my understanding, participating in various fora where they can get information and also provide information. But to what extent that is translating into practices or into the ground, that is still yet to be seen. I note that we noted that there seemed to be a bit of engagement between the various clusters, but also due to the high needs of, especially at the time when we were there, the high food distribution needs and the water distribution needs, other issues tended to be deprioritized. So that is also maybe a recommendation to keep pushing for the integration of protection issues. What other clusters are, I mean, I think the CP GBV AoR is trying to reach out through various means to other clusters, and of course we as UNICEF do that internally as well for our for the cluster we lead. That's all I can say on this for now.
Okay, great. Thanks, Marcus. That's super helpful. And then just for the sake of time, I know that Dinche and others at the GBV side have been putting together guidance notes for each of those clusters that were identified, WASH, particularly CCCM and shelter, so that they have all of these global guidance available, and putting it into language and then also sort of terms that they understand. And then Dinche, I think you're also planning on doing some additional trainings with other clusters. Did you want to mention that quickly?
Yes. So we were rolling out training on the GBV Pocket Guide specifically, which Marcus had mentioned previously, as a collaboration with UNICEF and UN Women and the GBV AoR as well, with support from Jessica. This will go to clusters and PSCA network members. We'll try and do this both at national but also at subnational levels. I do think there's also space for more training, capacity building, but not only in the form of trainings, but in very practical sessions as well on the IAC GBV standards for the other sectors, so the GBV guidelines. And work on this has also already, has been promoted over the years, but particularly now in this crisis, and making sure that this is adapted to Tigray level is also a priority.
Okay, I think you are in and out a little bit with your connection, but I'll just paraphrase a little bit that you are doing integrated trainings along with UNICEF and other partners to staff, and then also implementing partners of our other clusters, particularly ones that we've identified risks with. And our very last question, as I said, I'm conscious of time, and this is around monitoring grave violations. Are we doing anything around monitoring? So either the MARA, which is a monitoring mechanism, or other. And then how are we ensuring that we're maintaining confidentiality throughout this process? And this will be our last question.
Okay, great. Yeah, I believe I tried to answer it in the chat as well. But we are working with a range of different actors who would be involved in reporting on sexual violence. Unless this is the question around the media, but I did answer that one as well in the chat. So not so much the media reporting, but in terms of reporting as a UN up to political bodies as well. We're really making sure that as GBV AoR that we are included and wherever necessary and appropriate, leading the conversations around GBV case reporting from health facilities, from partners, and we are in conversation jointly with the Protection Cluster and with the Office for the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who of course also have functionality and role and responsibility in this space. So the main aim is that we can marry the data that we have and that partners are already collecting in an ethical way with the other reporting requirements that exist at national and global levels. And unfortunately, we don't at the moment have the GBV IMS, though that is an ongoing or quite a newer conversation for this country.
Great, thank you, Dinche. That was well understood. Very lastly, we had a few questions throughout about how our partners can access the referral pathways for both child protection and also GBV. Can you very quickly let us know how that can be done?
Yes, yes. So at the local levels, these referral pathways are established and also discussed as an AoR. And then to be further disseminated. So presumably partners that are asking questions about this would be on the ground, and we have the two coordination mechanisms, one in Mhpss and one in Tigray. So this would be your main entry point. If you or your partner, your local partner, do not yet have these contacts, then yeah, feel free to, of course, as a first port of call, reach out to us.
Yes, and also note, if you are an organization that's not providing GBV services but are interested in understanding more about the role of non-GBV service providers in terms of the GBV response, please do get in touch with our GBV AoR colleagues in Ethiopia. As mentioned, we will be doing some trainings on the Pocket Guide, which specifically highlights the role of non-GBV specialists and what you can do in the face of this crisis. So I want to thank everyone very much for joining us, particularly our colleagues in Tigray. I know we started a little late and we wanted to make sure that Bahailu from UNICEF and our colleagues from Imagine One Day and from the Bureau of Labor and Social Affairs were able to join us and felt comfortable with the modality. So thank you so much, everyone from the Tigre side, for joining us and for the very comprehensive presentations. They're really well noted and appreciated, as you could see from all of the questions. And thank you to Eric and Dinche for all of the information you presented and for guiding this response both at national level and then supporting the subnational level as well. Just to note that both Eric and Dinche cover the entire country, and Tigre, as we know, is one, not small portion, but one portion of that response for them as well. So thank you very much. Just another reminder to everybody that you can find the recording and the PowerPoint presentations from all of our speakers on our respective websites. And you can, we will also be having a summary note. So someone will go through these meeting minutes and the recordings and the chat to make sure that we've consolidated all of this information on your behalf. That might not be uploaded as quickly as the other resources, but note that is coming as well. So thank you all very much for joining us and being so, and advocating on behalf of women and girls and men and boys in this crisis. And on behalf of the regional GBV AoR team for East and Southern Africa, and also on behalf of the regional GBV working group, we really appreciate your participation, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have additional questions. So thank you again for joining, and keep us all in your thoughts. So thank you.